Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 12 of Backpacks and Stories. Today, I'm here with Amena.
Hi there.
Would you like to start by introducing yourself?
Yes, sure thing. My name is Amena. I'm from Quebec, the French part of Canada. I'm 32 years old and I've been in Australia since 2018. Before that, I was living back in Quebec.
A long time in Australia.
Very long time, yes.
And right now, you are currently on your path to become a permanent resident.
That's the plan, yes. So I had extra visas because of COVID. I had the normal working holiday visas, which a lot of people have. And then because of COVID, they gave us extra years and it took a long time to get these visas. So I've had 5 years and a half so far. I still have another year and then I am trying to get a permanent residency, but it's very hard, complicated and quite expensive. So fingers crossed.
Yes. Well, I wish you all the best in your endeavors, and you've been working very hard for it. So I
Thank
know
you.
for sure you're going to get it done sooner rather than.
Thank you very much.
And do you want to talk about what do you do? What do you do in Australia in life?
Yeah, so for the last 3 years-ish, I've been managing hostels, so youth hostels. I started early in 2020, where I met you. And basically, it's a bit of everything. So if you're a hostel manager here anyway in Australia, you do reception a lot of time, and then you do a bit of everything else that needs to be done. So training the staff, hiring people, buying the food that's needed, the drinks, making sure the housekeeping is done properly, doing a bit of housekeeping, organizing events, managing website, replying to reviews. It's never boring. There's always something to do. I've done this most of the time I was in Australia. Otherwise, I've been receptionist, waitress. I've packed fruits. I've picked fruits because we need to do 3 months of farm work or original work in order to get a second year. And then in the second year, we need 6 months to get the other year. So I've done this part in 2018, and now I can do whatever I want. So that's better.
You're free.
Yes, I am free.
And I don't remember if I've asked you, but how did you end up at the hostel in early? How did you end up working there on reception?
There. I arrived in early after COVID, so they opened the border of Queensland, and another friend and I, Mary, we just drove all the way from Melbourne to Early because we were cold and it was winter, so we stopped when we were hot enough, which was Early Beach. And it was just really, really pretty when we arrived in town. Personally, I really wanted to live in Early even before putting a foot in Australia in 2018. Whitehaven Beach was my screensaver, and I just thought it looked like paradise and a cool place to live. And I wanted to open my own hostel in South America. So the goal was to gain experience there and eventually leave and open in Australia, in South America. And when I arrived in the hostel, I just booked a week because we had been sleeping in the front seat for a month and not having any comfort. So I just wanted a bed. And it just felt like home. Like I walked in the hostel and they have palm trees and hammocks, tables. Everybody was friendly and smiling to me, and it just instantly felt like I belonged there. But at first, because hours were reduced and it was COVID, so not many hours, not many jobs. But I just waited a bit. I applied everywhere, and just a bit of a funny story. I actually applied to another hostel, the base hostel, and I sent them a resume. They called me. And then I did an interview with them, and I told them I was going to get back to them in a few days because I was waiting to hear back from many jobs on the East Coast. And I sent them an email saying, yeah, I'm interested. I can start whenever you want. And somehow my email never left my mailbox. So they never got the email. And when I called them, they told me, oh no, we've filled the position. So after that, I just went back to the owners here and I told them, well, do you still have the place at reception? Because in the end it didn't work because this was just 15 hours, so I wanted full time. But I started working really minimum time, and then 4 years after, I'm still here working full time. So I think it was meant to be at this place.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy that you even knew before Australia that was kind of your destination up there. And how did you feel the first time you saw Whitehaven Beach?
It's gorgeous. I cried. I'm really not emotional person. I never cry in general. But I had imagined it so much, and it was actually prettier. And the way it's done, you've seen it. But when you go to the lookout, you don't see anything, and then it's incredible, turquoise, white sand, and yeah, I was just so happy I made it there because it took me a year and a half in Australia before I was able to afford going there and actually enjoying it. So definitely worth the wait.
Yeah, yeah, it's really incredible. That really incredible.
Mm-hmm.
How many times have you been now?
I think around 25 now.
25 times.
Because we sell the boat trips at the hostel, so a lot of companies, in order to get us to sell their boat trip, they give us a free trip on it.
Mm-hmm.
So most people do a few and then they stop, but I really like going to the beach in Whitehaven, so I try to test as many as I can, mainly day trips, and I've done, I don't know, maybe 5 overnight trips when we sleep on the boat. And it does help us to sell them, because if I like the boat, the food, the snorkeling we do, I will recommend it more. So yeah, I haven't been back this year, but in the next few weeks I should.
In the next few weeks.
Yes.
No, I mean, it is really one of the most beautiful places in Australia, for sure. And
so, yes.
you're very, I would say, fortunate. I mean, I know that it's part of you and you work very hard, but you are fortunate to live there. And
yeah, still.
Obviously, that it is. It's kind of a shame that there are people who live in Airlie and don't regularly go out.
I know.
Islands, you know.
It is expensive. If I lived there long term, I would get a boat or get somebody that knows how to skip a boat, because otherwise there's not that many things to do. But when you have a boat, you have access to, it's 74 islands. It's not only Whitehaven. That's so much to explore around here. But a lot of Aussies have never been here. A lot of people on the West Coast where I was didn't even know what it was. Whitehaven with Sunday's early beach, they had no clue where it was.
No, really.
Many people, either Australians that were born in WA and never left in Western Australia, or just backpackers that stayed in WA the whole time they were there. And it's always like this. It's so gorgeous. It's like in Canada. I never went to the west part when I was young, but I still knew where Jasper and Vancouver and Banff were, because it's touristic places that everybody goes to. But somehow Airlie doesn't make it to the West Coast.
That's really interesting. But they always say West is best over there, no?
It's different. I like both. It's very quiet on the West Coast, but the landscapes are incredible as well. It's very impressive.
I mean, I only briefly went to Perth and Esperance and another couple of spots. I haven't done it in North, but I think the East Coast, I don't know, there's something about the East Coast of Australia that's just, it's incredible. It has some really special energy. It's a really special place in the world.
Yes, I feel like it's really good for backpackers. It's more of a short-term vibe, and definitely more nightlife and party and everything than the West Coast. People usually go to the West Coast, from what I've seen and heard, to stay there long. So either they want to stay in Australia, get a permanent residency, or it's their last year of visa. They want to work in mines and make a lot of money before going back to their home country, or to travel in Asia or somewhere else for a long time. But the East Coast people are still excited because they're at the beginning of their travel. Usually they've arrived in Australia, they want to see everything, do everything. So they do crazy itineraries. This morning I had 10 people arriving at 7, and they took like 17 hours of bus in a night bus to arrive. And that was never the case in COVID, because people were not in a rush. But now we have a lot of tourists as well, not only on the working visa, but really just on a 3 months max. And they do the East Coast in 2-3 weeks. They do Sydney, Melbourne super fast, Byron Bay, Brisbane, and they go up. And then from Fraser Island, which is another amazing place, they take a night bus to do Airlie, 1 night in the hostel. They do an overnight boat trip where you don't sleep super good, and then they catch another night bus to go. Like it's really exhausting traveling. But
no,
I'll do it now.
No, I do the East Coast like that. I think it is really nice. It's nice to do it relaxed and. Have you traveled? Have you stopped pretty much everywhere on the East Coast?
I think so, yes, pretty much. I've done all the way to Cape Tribulation in North, so I haven't been to Cape York, but Cape Trib, and then from Brisbane I've done Fraser, Yeppoon. During COVID there was nothing to do, so we stopped everywhere. But because a lot of things were closed in National Park, I feel like I've still missed a few things, but I've done most of the touristic and nice things, especially up north in here.
Do you plan on doing Cape York at some point?
Maybe if I do the loop, because I haven't been to Darwin, So I've done all the way to Broome and Cape Tribulation. So if I can do the loop on the top and then finish my whole loop.
I mean, that's a really big loop.
It's a big one, I know.
A lot of people who don't do the loop, there are a lot of people who do the loop don't even go up to Cape York.
Yeah, I don't really mind Cape York, but I definitely go to Northern Territory and see Darwin and stuff.
Have you been to Uluru?
Yes. Yeah, my first year at Uluru and the south of the Outback, but not the north part and Kakadu.
Have you been to South Australia?
Briefly, like a tour from the Outback, Uluru, and then Kings Canyon. We were going south, then to Adelaide, Grampians, Gresham Road, but I didn't spend that much time in South Australia itself.
I really like South Australia. I think it's it's an underrated part of Australia.
Definitely. Yeah. Where were you? In Adelaide or around?
Well, I spent in total maybe 3 months in Adelaide. But then I spent a couple of weeks in the Outback in a place called Port Kenny. It's 10 hours west of Adelaide. No one knows anything about Port Lincoln is the closest place.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
But even Port Lincoln's like 3 hours away, and that was probably the most remote that I've been, and I think it's too much for me.
That seems very, very remote.
10 hours, and there's a bus once a week to Adelaide. Once a week.
Yeah, I would panic completely.
It's too much. It's too disconnected. It's a small town. You can have it's a different kind of life, I have one friend who's living there, and he's working on his residency as well. But I think for long term it would be very difficult.
Hard. I feel like even it's not really how many hours you're from a city, because when I did my I didn't see anything either, because we were just working, and I was, I think, 3 hours inland from Brisbane, but I still didn't go more to Brisbane. Like, if people have a car, maybe, but for us, both times I did farms, Ayr was in Queensland, close from the sea. I never swam because we were just working, and I had no car, and there was no public transport. So for 4 months, I didn't move either. Even if I was only 3 hours, we were doing 6-7 days per week, and we're not allowed to take days off. So we just worked. It was remote, but I feel like even if I had been nowhere from a city, I would have felt as remote as being in the middle of nowhere, because we were just stuck working.
Okay, so I want to ask you about the first time that you left Canada. Why did you want to leave Canada?
I left when I was 16. That's a long time ago. I did an English immersion in California. So I did a month in a host family near Los Angeles. And I think when I was 15, I told my parents, okay, I'm going. And they just told me, whoa, wait for a year, work, put money on the side, and then, babysitting or selling newspaper and stuff, in order to be able to pay a good part of it and be more responsible. So yeah, I left in an association, I think it's called AISEC, AISEC. And they were basically supervising us in California, but we were in host families, receiving English classes every morning, and then not doing much the rest of the time, to be honest.
And did you pretty much learn English in 1 month? You became very confident in 1 month?
Not really. Like, I understood quite well before leaving. I would say half well, maybe. But I struggled speaking because we only learn in Quebec in schools. Montreal is a tiny bit different, but I'm from a region, so most people don't speak really English where I'm from. But when I was 15, I really wanted to learn English. My father is bilingual, so it really motivated me. And I started watching TV in English with subtitles, didn't understand a thing for months, then removed the subtitles, still didn't understand. And eventually I managed to understand what I was watching, and I watched like Grey's Anatomy and Bones, super complicated medical shows. And I started reading in English as well. But it's ages ago, so I had a dictionary, and I would just open the dictionary and write down every word that I didn't know to try to remember them, and then at night read them before going to sleep. So I think a lot of people assume we speak English because we're from Canada, but in my region it's not the case at all, and it's years of work. So I prepared as much as I could, but when I arrived there, I'm like, oh, there's no subtitles, there's nobody to help me out. So I would tell sometimes my whole family just to pause a minute. I would run to grab my book and then write down what they were telling me to practice. And I didn't call my family for a whole month because I didn't want to speak a word of French. So I wrote one email per week saying, yeah, I'm alive and everything is fine. So I think they learned very early that I was really independent and would like to travel a lot. But the classes we had were really, really bad. And basically everybody wanted to speak French. So I'm one of the only ones that really wanted to go there to learn English, and that put money also in it and time. And most people were just there because their parents paid for it and they wanted to go to Hollywood and Disneyland. So it was a bit of a clash.
Yeah. I remember when I first met you actually, and it took me by surprise because I think you were the first person from Quebec that I'd met, or at least consciously had met in my life. And when you told me, but people in my town don't speak English, I was so surprised that a place in Canada, you know, we have a perception of Canada being an English speaking country, that English isn't spoken in your town.
Yeah, I think maybe now people in the teenage years, they will learn a bit more with Netflix and everything being easier. For us, if you didn't travel, there was no reason to learn it. Like my father's side, they speak English because they're from Montreal. My mom's side, they always grew up in Rimouski, so it's 6 hours east from Montreal. And there was just no need for them to speak English. And TV is super hard to watch in English. If you're in Montreal, the radio, you have English channels. The TV, it's way easier, more accessible. Our radio is only in French. You go to the library, it's almost only books in French. The TV, we had maybe 1 or 2 channels in English, and they were super hard to get. So nowadays, with Netflix and all these platforms, I think it's more accessible. And kids learn from an early age as well. I think they start from 6 now. I started at 8 because I wanted to learn, so I was in a special program to learn English. But normal classes, we started at 11 years old and had 1 hour per week learning the fruits, the veggies, like animals, irregular verbs, and that's pretty much it. And you're never put in a situation where you actually need to speak. So unless you do immersion or you watch more TV, it's really hard to learn it by ourselves.
Yeah, it's really, really interesting. Okay, so we'll dig in a bit to the issue of Quebec identity. So, but I want to start from the angle of, how do you feel like it is an important thing that people are still learning a good level of English as well?
I do think so, because I really like to think that everybody should travel and explore other places in the world, and not knowing English really limits these options. I think it's a really, really fine line with teaching people English, but still keeping French alive and not losing it, which has been a struggle since the beginning. I think it's really impressive that French is still everywhere in Quebec 400 years after, even if we're surrounded by English. But I wish I had more English classes at school, so I would not have struggled that much outside of school to learn it. But it's very delicate, and Montreal reality is very different as well, because you hear English all the time. So I think there are people just learn it and they speak Franglish, like they speak English and French in the same sentence, and they grow up surrounded by people that speak it. So it's really not a concern. But in the rest of Quebec, I think it's still important that we teach English, just to open more opportunities for people living there.
But didn't you tell me something like, in some situations it's illegal for them to teach English?
Yeah, well, we can receive classes. Basically, you can't go to an English school if I'm not mistaken, if you're not English speaker, or if one of your parents isn't an English speaking person. Let's say my dad was from UK, my mom's from Quebec, then I would be allowed to go to English schools, which didn't even exist in my town, so that wasn't a thing. But in a few cities, there are some. But if both of your parents are from Quebec, you grew up in Quebec, you can't go to English school, just to make sure that people keep speaking French. And then when we reach cégep, like the school before going to uni, then we can do whatever we want. So a lot of people go to cégep in English after that.
Yeah. But for example, a Latino family who've been living in Canada for 20 years and they speak English and then they move to Quebec, they have to put their child in French school.
I think they can go to English school because they don't have French as a first language.
No,
I'm not 100% sure.
met some people recently and it doesn't appear to be that way. It appears to be that
it needs to be one English.
Yeah. No, it has to be in French. They have to go to French.
Well, I think that does make sense. And I think people that don't speak English will struggle eventually. Again, Montreal is like separate part, but I think definitely kids should learn French. Otherwise, it's super hard to get friends and have a normal life because everything is so centered around French, and it's way easier to learn when we're young. I think both you and I learned later, but I would have rather learned English when I was 4 years old, than wait until later. Same for Spanish. So.
Yeah, 100% is a big advantage. Multilingualism, being a polyglot or bilingual or trilingual or whatever, it is so much easier when you start young. So, and like you say, I think French is a harder language to learn than English. So,
I do think so.
if children are growing up learning French, then along with their native language already, then I think it's so much easier to pick up English along the way as well. Another language to learn if they're at the right age, easy peasy.
Yeah, I think the more languages we speak, the easier it is to learn new ones, because our brain is like being formatted, and some will look alike a bit much. Like Italian would be easier for me now that I speak Spanish and French. Then when I actually went in Italy, I didn't understand a thing at first, but now it's a bit easier. I think it is easier for you a bit to speak French or learn French because you already know Spanish super well for a few things, maybe.
Yeah, I think French is very much in between English and Spanish. Like you can really see so many similarities because obviously we've taken a lot of things from Old French and English. But French is also considered to be the most Germanicized Latin language.
Okay.
So English is considered to be the most Latinicized German.
Of the German, yeah.
So it's like they're meeting too, and French. We've been rivals for a long time. We're like siblings with problems, England and France. And there's been so much back and forth for so long that you can see a lot of similarities between English and French.
Definitely.
Spanish.
Yeah, we do try sometimes to say a word in English, like the same word I would say in French. I say it in English with an English accent, and sometimes it works. It's always very satisfying.
Yeah, and if not, you can try the Spanish way, and normally you'll find something you can work out. So going back to the Quebec identity, can you explain a little bit about the history and what makes the Quebec identity different from the rest of Canada?
Different. It's way back my history class, but basically at first French people colonized what was called in the past Canada, the High Canada, Lower Canada, and then later on the English arrived and then won, obviously, and they had a war super fast in Plaine d'Abraham, which is in Quebec City. So they faced each other, Montcalm and Wolfe, I think, and it lasted a ridiculous amount of time, really short. And then the English won, but the French was already really important because they had been there for a long time. And already, the names, the streets, the cities, everything was in French. And it was not only Quebec, they had also small pockets in the rest of Canada, which still exists nowadays in other provinces, and New Brunswick, which is attached to, like, next to Quebec. A lot of people there are bilingual, and that's another question, but there's the Acadians, les Acadiens, who live there, and they have a really strong Acadiens, Acadians, I think, Acadien. It's also very strong like independence feeling for them as well, and they had their own story. But for Quebec, basically, somehow French managed to stay alive, even when we were being surrounded by English speakers everywhere in the States, which were the colonies in the time, and then in Canada. But yeah, Quebec is the oldest place, if I'm not mistaken, in North America. In 1608, it was founded, and then it evolved, and then Canada became the whole thing with the Union, I think, and not sure about the year. I'll try it. But when it happened, they managed to sign rules so that French would stay alive in Quebec. But in Canada in general, all the provinces are very different from one to another. So I feel like it's very similar to Australia. The laws are different regarding a lot of subjects. So the transport, for example, department, like the ministries, the transport, education, for drinking, the laws are different. Everything pretty much is very different. So Quebec has its own thing, but then Ontario can have different rules, and Alberta can have different rules from Ontario as well. So everybody has their own entity. And then obviously the dollar is the same. The money, the post, the army is global, so it's federal level. But on a provincial level, it's extremely different. So for me, the most obvious ones are the language. So the fact that we speak French is totally different. And it's not a French similar to the French in France. It's our own as well. And we have our own TV show. So we don't watch French TV show. It's Quebecois TV shows. The same for the music, the books. We really have our own separate culture. And if you ask me, I could not tell you a Canadian, like sometimes I don't know if a singer is Canadian or if a book is, because I don't relate to it that much, and we don't learn who are the Canadian authors because we learn what's in Quebec, and that's pretty much it. Some will tell you they know it. Maybe it's just my school and how I was raised. But I would say, yeah, definitely the language is big. And then the school system is completely different. So on that matter, I think Quebec is the only one that's really different. We go to high school like the rest, and then we have one less year of high school, but we need to go to a transition school. It's called Cégep, and then it allows you to apply for uni after. So we finish high school at 16, 17 years old, and then it's 2 years of pre-university, that's called. So from what I've heard, it looks like the last year of high school for people, and then the first year of uni, pretty much. So we have philo classes, French, English, and then you choose whatever area you want to go after. So more human science, politics, psychology, or more pure science like chemistry, biology. And then after 2 years, you can apply for uni, or you do a technical class of 3 years, and then you work straight after. So you can be a social work technician or a nurse, and classes that take 3 years. But if people from another province, they come and they want to start uni, because the system is so different, they need to do 1 year preliminary at uni before starting their bachelor. And then I don't really know what happened if we go there, but I know it's different as well. And even the law is very different. So we have mainly civil law, like in France, and the rest of Canada is using more common law. So it's a huge difference. They learn both in law school, if I'm not mistaken, but the way the system works is completely different.
Oh, sorry, I don't know what that refers to.
It's just the system of law. Like, I don't know anything about it really, but you can use civil law or common law. So it's two different ways of, I think, the way they analyze cases in court. I think one refers to past cases and the other one refers to a code that has everything written. It's big generalization. I don't have a lot of skills in laws, but it's completely different the way the court works and the way the lawyers operate. And the rest of Canada is like UK, and we're like France.
Interesting. Okay.
Mm.
And on that note as well, I remember you telling me the degree you studied is only, you can only use it in Quebec, you told me.
That doesn't happen that often, to be honest. Most degrees will be, like, if you're an engineer, you'll be an engineer somewhere else. Same for social work. I studied what's called psychoeducation, and it was created in Quebec. So it's what makes it so nice and different, I think, because it's a new approach in the 80s, I think. But because it was created in Quebec, it's starting to be exported now. And a lot of classes will be similar to psychology or social work or specialized education. But the diploma itself, it's a bit hard to have it transferred somewhere else. But for example, my friend went to work in Yukon, and they still recognize her classes and like her experience. So she still got a good job related to it, but there's no term that is the equivalent. Same here, I can't find anything that's similar. And to be psychoeducator, you need to do a master. So if I had done a master, at least I would have been in an order, which maybe gives it a bit more credit. But because I didn't do it, I have a bachelor. You know, I don't have a title or anything. I still think all the classes were useful, and I can transfer this knowledge and this experience, but it makes it harder to work somewhere else because you have to explain what it is, and it's not going to be on their list of things that are worth the same. So social work definitely easier, but psychoeducation is very, very new, so it's harder.
Yeah, interesting. So coming back to that question, I will specifically ask you if you can explain it. You don't feel Canadian.
I don't. That's very personal, though. I have friends from Quebec that definitely feel Canadian. I've lived with one for 3 years, and she felt 100% Canadian. She's still a Quebec, listens to music and everything. But in first place, she felt Canadian. She also lived on the West Coast, so I feel like that makes a big difference. People that have lived in other provinces, they embrace a bit more the culture. Personally, I've never really felt I was Canadian. I always say I'm from Quebec, the French part of Canada, because I don't expect people to know what it is. But yeah, I mean, if I'm at the other end of the world, being here, I will relate a bit with Canadians, but it's almost the same for me that if I meet somebody from United States, because we will have similar culture of North America, we'll like the hockey and poutine and very general things. But a lot of the time I have people at reception telling me they're from Canada, and I'm like, oh, nice, you're from there. And then conversation ends, and there's no there's no feeling of we belong to the same place. But if I meet somebody from France, even if it's completely different country, different continent, the culture is extremely different, way more than between Quebec and the rest of Canada. But because of the second language, I feel like we have more of a connection.
Really?
But it's again, it's really personal. In terms of a culture, it'll be more similar to somebody from the rest of Canada, obviously. But if I go to other parts of Canada, I feel like I'm traveling, like I'm on holidays. And I did work in Vancouver for 3 months years ago, and it was even more so. Like the culture felt so different for me. It always depends who you meet and who you spend time with. And I was mainly with Aussies, but the Canadians that I met there, they were very different. They would go to church a bit more, were more religious. They would stay with their parents longer, like until they were, I don't know, 25, 27, to then go with their husband, wife, or they like to have their own house. Whereas in Quebec, we're a bit more independent. I think we leave home super early, 19, 20 years old. We live with friends. A lot of people stay single long. Marriage is not a thing happening right now at all. It's way more like, and that was a big difference. Again, it's not the whole Canada that's like this, but my experience in Vancouver was a bit like this. And I worked in a restaurant, and when people saw that I spoke French, they automatically assumed I was French. They never even thought I was from Quebec. And even if I told them, oh yeah, I'm just, from Quebec, and so many asked me, what visa are you on? Which work visa? I'm like, I don't need a visa. I'm Canadian. I have the passport. But
Yeah.
even myself, for weeks, I wonder what visa I needed. And it's not even a joke. I just realized I don't need a visa. It's my own country. I can work wherever. But it feels so different that for me, it feels like almost another country, not in a bad way. And I have absolutely nothing against the rest of Canada. And I think that's a bad idea that people have, that Quebec people don't like the rest of the provinces, and vice versa. Personally, I don't have anything against anybody. I just don't feel like I belong there that much, which makes it very limited to I feel connected to people from Quebec, not really from France, not really from the rest of Canada. So we're kind of a small bubble, but I love the rest of Canada. Like there's nothing wrong with it. Same, but it's just different from me.
And do you want to see an independent Quebec?
I would love to. I like the idea of it. My parents were really involved in it in the 80s and 90s. I think in that time that was more of a big thing and maybe more realistic that it could have happened. I haven't checked this or read on this for years, but the movement was really more present. Nowadays, I'm really not sure how realistic it is and how, money wise and all the real things that would have to be put in place. But on an idea level or like just, yeah, psychologically speaking, yes, I would like to be independent, but realistically, I don't know what can be done about it.
Yeah, I can understand now. From when we had those conversations a couple of months ago, when I saw you in Montreal when you
Mm-hmm.
were here visiting, I thought it was a bit more out there, the idea, but I think now I understand a bit more about Quebec culture and why people feel so different. But I still think that we're better together at the end of the day. I think like with obviously the UK leaving the EU, which was a disaster,
Mm-hmm.
and then Scotland wanting to leave the UK.
Mm-hmm.
I can understand that some reasons why, but at the end of the day, we build this world together, and if we're just breaking apart these countries, I don't know how productive that really is at the end of the day.
Eventually, yeah. Because I don't know. I'm definitely 100% for independence, but the same for Catalonia as well, and for the Basque Country and for Scotland, and it's just such a strong identity. But then on the real life level, how does it work? I can't pronounce myself, but yeah, the idea of it is just have your independence and feel like you belong more. Like I would love to have a passport from Quebec. But then again, what is it? Does it change daily when I don't even live there? I'm not a good one to talk about it because I'm not even living there anymore. But my identity is quite strong.
But I think what would be more effective is just this idea of education and integration. And, like you say, people on the other side of Canada don't understand that, don't understand that you guys are part of Canada in the same way, And I think it's something that these countries share in common. The UK and Canada are very multicultural places that were built on integration, and integrating people into society. So we shouldn't be moving towards breaking up these countries and promoting ideas of separation and segregation. But I think we should be more educating the people about cultural differences and how we can integrate everyone together and make our countries stronger and have this mixed cultural identity.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. I think it's a bit more inclined towards this in the rest of Canada. I don't remember how it was called. A class I took years ago that the rest of Canada is more multiculturalism, using multiculturalism, and then Quebec is using another term to integrate immigration or stuff like this. But ours was more you keep your own, but you also take our own, and then in the other parts it was a bit of everybody taking on the culture of everybody that's arriving and creating a new culture of its own. But again, the language makes it hard, I think. But you've lived in Toronto, you said. How do you feel the difference? Like what did you notice first between Toronto and Montreal, which are two huge cities? And
it's a good question. I think here is a lot more relaxed. I think people enjoy life a bit more. I think people here are a bit more genuine. I just think people in Toronto, everything is so business focused. It's really hard to really meet people and make friends. Here, I feel like I've had a better experience of that. In terms of, I can see a lot more European influence here. I think Toronto, like you were saying, is very, very multicultural, very multinational. And here in Montreal, it does feel more European, Not that where I live in the English part. I don't hear French so much.
Mm-hmm.
Hear it every day. Of course, people start conversations in French, but are quick to change into English.
Yeah.
So there are things that I notice. Sometimes I come across people who don't speak English, which again is really interesting. But now I'm kind of used to it.
Mm-hmm.
But at first I was a bit taken aback. There were people like that, but no, now I understand. And yeah, so yeah, it's different. And but I think, like you say, all the provinces have their quirks, have their different cultures, and I'd like to see a little bit more of Canada before I leave to get to experience that. But yeah, it's nice. I do feel like people are a bit closed off. Like people who are born here and grew up here, they have their circles, and it is hard to integrate. Especially if who doesn't speak French.
Yeah. I feel the same in Vancouver, actually. It might be a big city thing in general that people have their friends and they stay there. Whereas in Quebec, we all came from small regions and we all studied in Quebec City together. And then it was easy to meet people because everybody was on their own. I've never lived in Montreal, but when I tried Vancouver or even Melbourne, I would start to know people. Like my colleagues, I wanted to have Aussie friends, and I would start, talking with colleagues, and you have a beer, and then that's it. So it's hard to get into people's circle because they already have their friends. I don't know if that's the case in Montreal. I know in Australia, a lot of locals, they don't want to get friends with people that will leave because they're tired of doing it, and people go away, and then it's just a lot of efforts, which we know living in hostel, to like get to know somebody and give your everything to a relationship, friendship, and then people will leave. But I think, yeah, I think it's the same in Vancouver or Montreal. If people already have their circle of friends, especially when we get a bit older, maybe at 18, 19, it's easier. But I think when people reach like end of 20s or 30s, yeah, they don't have time or motivation, and definitely more so if somebody doesn't speak French, then it's a lot of efforts, I guess.
I mean, I think it is quite a similar thing. I think in the UK it would be a similar situation, and it is a part of integration. It is a part of the immigration process that those things take time at the end of the day.
Yeah.
To really integrate and to make your group of local friends, it does take time. And I think in our situations, we are always going to be more drawn to immigrants anyway, because immediately we have something in common,
Yeah,
we
definitely.
have this identity of we're not from here, we're from somewhere else. We might be here for different reasons, but we're here, and right now we have this in common. And for that reason, it's really easy to connect to people. I think maybe when you've been here 5, 10, 15 years, you start to understand more about the culture and the references. Yeah, maybe it's easier to meet people and to connect with them. But it is definitely a big thing that you've grown up with completely different things. Like you say, even to the rest of Canada, to France, you have your own thing here. And is something that it is difficult you can't just learn that overnight. You have
exactly.
you have to live those things to understand and to be able to connect with them.
And I think even me, when I go back home, I have obviously my friends from when I was in high school and uni and everything, but to get to know new people, I will find it easier to meet travelers or people that are expat than people that are from Quebec but that I've never met before. And I went back for 6 months after my first year in Australia, and it's always super weird when you go back home and you've changed so much and you've experienced so many things, especially the first time you leave for that long, and then you come back and everybody has the kind of the same life, and I saw the same, and the conversations are hard. Sometimes I don't know what to say because it's such a different reality. And if you don't go to school, and if like at uni, it's super easy to meet people in classes and activities. But even where I was working, I absolutely love my job and I love my colleagues, but they were a bit older and they already had their families, they had their lives. So after work, it was like, hey, let's grab a beer, let's do something, which would work here. but then they already had their life, so that was not happening. So even if you're from a place, I feel like when we reach, we're not 8 years old, but when we reach like a certain age, it gets tougher to meet people, and people will have kids and everything. So even if it's your own place, creating friendships later in life is always a bit more of an effort than when you're just put in the same class, or and you have to do activities. The thing here, wherever you go, especially big cities, it's if I do classes of gym or dance or a hobby, that then I will find people that have the same activities than me. Other than that, you can't meet somebody in the street and be like, oh, can you be my friend? Because I want to have new friends. It's sadly not as here it works.
You can, but it's just, it takes a lot. Even for someone as extroverted as you saying that, you know.
Yeah.
So we'll come off that conversation for a bit. So your next experience outside of Canada, living and traveling, was in South America.
The longest one, yeah. I've traveled Europe and the States a few times, but living somewhere else was in South America 12 years ago.
Long time.
That's it's a very long time ago. Yes, I did go back after. So I did 6 months in 2012, traveling, working a bit 3 months, and traveling after. Then I just traveled in 2015, and in 2017 I worked in the north of Peru for 4 months. So I didn't travel that much. I just worked full time for my internship. Yeah.
Do you want to start on the first one, when you were working and traveling? Where did you go?
Yeah.
What did you do?
We did. I traveled with my best friend from home. We did from Chile to Colombia. So we had 1 month to do Chile, Bolivia, then go all the way to the north of Peru. So we just improvised everything. Basically, the only thing we had set was 2-3 months of volunteer work in Peru with the local organization that we had connected before going. So we didn't use any NGOs or anything from Quebec. We just contacted directly the small village. And at the beginning, we had booked 3 nights in a hostel and no flight back. And I was 20, she was 19. And we just left with a backpack and said, okay, bye. And yeah, again, we had no internet. Like it was a different type of travel. So we had one iPod Touch that we could have Wi-Fi on for 2 people for 6 months. And we never missed not having anything else because we didn't know what it was to travel with a phone. So we did a month travel, 3 months pretty stable at the same place, and then we travel again for about 2 months after that.
Wow. Yeah, that must have been a really amazing experience, having that experience traveling before phones.
It was really good. We just spoke to locals more, and our Spanish we barely spoke a word of Spanish when we arrived. So again, we had a dictionary, and then we were just asking people like directions and where to go somewhere. And it's a big generalization, but I think in a lot of countries, South America, they don't like to they don't like to say no to somebody, or that they don't know something, to annoy us. So instead of saying no, I don't know where that is, they would tell us the direction, but even if they didn't know where to go. So we walked for an hour around the train station and went back to the exact same place because everybody was telling us the wrong direction. But when you're on holiday, you're not in a rush. It's funny. And we met so many people, way more than we would now, because you use Google Map and it's too easy. You don't need the help of locals. But there, we were always talking to reception to know what to do, where to go. And some hostel had a computer. So we would just book for the next place we were going and then go to the bus station to buy bus tickets. And it was amazing. Yeah. Really, really improvising the whole thing. And it's also meeting other travelers. So on our way up, we were supposed to skip Colombia and go to Guatemala in the end. That was a few years after Ingrid Betancourt had been kidnapped in Colombia. And that had put a really, really bad idea of Colombia in the media. So we were supposed to skip it. We were young. Everybody was dangerous. And then we met so many travelers going south that told us it was the best country they had visited, that we changed our mind and we ended up going there for 3 weeks. And it's still so far my favorite country. I feel like my home is in Peru because I work there and I live there. But on the travel side, Colombia blew our mind.
Mm-hmm. Where was your favorite place in Colombia?
Cartagena and Santa Marta.
Yeah? Why?
very hot and humid, and there's the beach, tropics, the turquoise water, like what you don't get a lot in South America and the Pacific coast.
I think you would have went before it's really boomed up. I think in the last years it's really boomed up. It's really beautiful, but is very touristic now. Very, very.
It wasn't at all when we went there. People were so happy to see tourists that they were inviting us to their home. They were talking to us. And by that time, we spoke better Spanish. So not perfect at all, but we could have a conversation a bit more than when we arrived. And I think people appreciate that. And they were just, really happy to have tourism, like tourists bringing money and visiting the place. And they really wanted us to like it. So they were giving their everything.
Yeah, that's really, really lucky. When I went there, I went there in December, and tourists.
Okay.
Yeah, I think you might be a bit disappointed if you.
I don't know. I still have friends that go every year, different friends, and they all love it for so many reasons. Like the nature is incredible, the weather, people are super friendly, and the fact that it's got Pacific coast and Caribbeans is also very different from the other ones. So I'll give it a go soon, eventually.
Soon.
Well, in like I don't know, a few years, but I do miss South America a lot.
Yeah, it's a really, really beautiful continent. And in 2015, where did you go?
Just Peru. So I was with a friend. We did Mexico and then Peru. So I just showed him where I used to work in 2012, and we did Machu Picchu again. So in 2012, I went to Machu Picchu with my friend I was living with, and then my parents came over and our friend from Quebec as well. So we had a week together around Machu Picchu, but we took the train because we didn't have much time. And then in 2015, with my friend, we did the Salcantay trek. So it's 5 days walking in the mountains to reach Machu Picchu. And we stayed around for a week exploring Valle Sagrada that has so many good spots. And then we went to where I was living for a while, and we relaxed because we were rushing the whole time in Mexico before.
And then your last trip was when you were living in Peru.
Yeah, in the north of Peru. It's called Piura. It's really, really close from the equator. And it's not my favorite place in South America. I think I was there during a really bad time. They had flooding in 2017, really, really bad flooding. And that created heaps of problems. Like the street had a meter of water for weeks. We had a dengue epidemic and so many mosquitoes and stuff. But that Piura is supposed to be the driest place in South America. So they were obviously not equipped for it and not ready for something like this. So I'm lucky that it didn't affect me personally because I was in the top floor and stuff, but I had friends that lost their house, so that we needed help to remove the furniture, and we're just swimming in the street. It was completely surreal. But in general, that city is not really used to have expats. I think I met 7 in 4 months and it's a big city. It's 400,000 people, and it had 7 universities. So a lot of people that were my age, but not used at all to see other people. So I had extremely good friends, about 7, 8 Peruvian friends, mainly guys. And they were really, really nice. They included me in their circle. And when we were talking about that people like are close up a bit there, it was completely the opposite. They just welcomed me as if they had known me my whole life. I was part of everything they were doing, and that changed my experience there totally. But except from them, it was very different experience than the first 6 months I was there. And people would stop talking if I entered a restaurant. They would not say hi when I was saying hi in the street. They would look around to check me because I was a gringa or like a not Latinas. And I'm not tall, blonde, blue eyes or everything. I can usually go a bit into it, and I spoke Spanish way better by that time. But just the fact that they were not used to see somebody from elsewhere made me feel like an alien. And it was hard, but at the same time, I'm glad I lived it because I can a little bit more understand what it is for somebody that arrives in a all white Quebecois neighborhood, and that really stands out. And it's really a horrible feeling, to be honest. It's not fun.
Yeah, it's a part of the immigrant experiences. At times we feel, we feel like an outsider.
But I had never felt this before, ever in Peru or in South America, or even if you feel it, you feel still welcome. That was really like, we don't want anybody, or of course it's also being a girl and being catcalled, and which I really didn't have that many issues in the rest of South America in general. And the place I lived the first time in Peru, they were used to have expats, so we had heaps of Peruvian friends, and they were, yeah, really used to see people looking different or speaking different. But I think that place
And
is not used to it yet. So
the first place you lived in was Huanchaca.
yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. But I have heard. I mean, I haven't visited the north of Peru, but I've heard that it is a bit more. The people are more reserved and traditional.
I think they were just, I don't know if they were scared or something. It took time, but even it took me 3 months going 3 times per week to a dance class for people to say hi after I said hi. 3 months. And I don't feel like I'm intimidating, I say hi, I smile, and finally they were hi and I see my name, which is a really long thing. Whereas in one Chaco, like after a few days you're friends with people. But again, I had really good close friends, but the rest of it, they really created the barrier. Again, it's my personal experience. It might depend the neighborhood I was with. Like I was not necessarily in a good mindset either. Um, but I ended up almost not going out of my apartment because I was tired of having like the people watching me and feeling like I was weird. And I'd never do this. Like I like to go outside and meet people, so it went to an extreme for me.
Do up in that city, the people are they mostly speaking Spanish or Quechua, or they speak another language?
Only Spanish. Yeah.
Only Spanish.
Yeah. It was not they the people I met didn't look traditional too much, or it's not like around Cusco or the south. A lot of my friends actually could have been Spanish, or some had whiter skin than me. And one of my friends kept getting robbed because people thought he was gringo, which is really bad because he grew up there, like it's his own country. But if you see a photo, you couldn't be 100% sure who was from Peru or no. But they definitely spoke Spanish and no English, only Spanish music in the bars, the cafes, nothing from Enroll. So perfect immersion for Spanish, 100%. But yeah, it definitely felt like in a different country.
Yeah. And okay, and other than Cartagena, out of everywhere in South America, what would be your second favorite place?
Sorry, well, one Chaco is different. I feel like because I live there, it's magical and it's definitely the best time I've had. Um, but outside of their Salento in Colombia, that I really love, where they have the Palmeras, the Valley of Palm Trees.
Mm-hmm.
Just everything in Colombia, I really loved it. And then Machu Picchu, it's Machu Picchu, it's a magical site that I've been wanting to see for years. Chile was super impressive with Valle de la Luna and all the desert, which is different as well. I can't pin it to one thing. The Salar de Uyuni as well. It's so diverse. Everything you do every day is very different from what we have back home. But culture-wise, I would say Peru was definitely my favorite for the music, the food, the artesania. Like I still have bracelets from there. And Chile felt a bit more similar when we arrived in Santiago. It looked like a big city at first. Then you discover people and culture, but from an outsider point of view, the minute you arrive in Bolivia or Peru, you feel like you're somewhere else, especially out of Lima. And people have a bit more traditional costume, depending where, not costume, but clothes. But in Chile, at first, it was a good transition actually, because we felt at home, and then after a while, we got out of town.
Yeah.
What about you?
Where where's my favorite place?
Yeah.
Someone asked me this recently, and I think it would have to be Ushuaia in the bottom of Argentina.
Mm-hmm. In Patagonia? Oh.
Yeah, the right at the bottom of Patagonia. Yeah. Have you
What
done it
for?
in Patagonia?
No, I didn't go south of Santiago.
Yeah, you have to. You really have to.
I will.
You haven't been to Argentina either.
Not yet, no.
Right.
My list.
Yeah, as well. No, I just think that the landscapes are so incredible down there, and knowing that you are so far remote. You're in the most southern city in the world,
Mm-hmm.
and it just has a really, really special energy. Even though it's so cold in in summer, it was in the middle of summer. It was 12 degrees. You know,
Oh, yeah, no.
uh,
To
but
visit, it's good, but
the visit is good, and if the place feels warm, you know,
yeah.
it's a nice kind of energy, and I met people there. I met a Mexican dude, a Spanish dude, and an Argentinian.
Mm-hmm.
And this was only like I'd been in South America for just under 1 month at this point, so my Spanish was still very low. But I was keeping up mostly, and I was practicing, and I went on hikes with them, which I hadn't really done so much in the rest of the couple weeks in La Patagonia.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just a really good feeling. Like that was the end of my trip in La Patagonia, and then I flew to Buenos Aires, and it was a really nice way to say goodbye to that little part of the trip.
I'll put it on my list, bucket list.
Sure. But other than that, it's really hard to pick favorites, because I think,
It is.
I mean, I went to so many popular places,
Mm-hmm.
and you see why they're all popular, because they're so beautiful, you know.
Mm.
Seeing Iguazu and Ayuni and Atacama,
Mm-hmm.
Machu Picchu, like all of those places are just so stunning. They all have their own different beauties, you know,
Mm.
or their own different energies, meeting different people along the way. Like there's so many different reasons why the places feel like they do.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, to pick one place, I think it
It's
would have
impossible.
it is, yeah, yeah.
And it
But
depends, as you said, it depends of who you meet as well. Some places will be super normal and not in landscape, but the people you meet in a hostel or while doing a trek will change your experience completely and make it the best.
the people make the place.
Mm.
Yeah, for sure. So not long after your last trip, then you went to Australia.
Yeah, pretty much. I finished my master. So 2017 was really just working. I had 1 week off, I think, but I worked the whole time. And then I went home, finished my essay, whatever, and then I worked for 6 months full time in an NGO, a non-governmental organization, non-for-profit, and I was doing project management. I managed an event and stuff, and I liked the people I was working with, and I liked the job in general, but I wanted some change. And after 6 months, they asked if I wanted to stay, so they offered me to stay for longer. And I just realized I didn't want to stay for long in Quebec. I really hate the cold, and I didn't want to be 9 to 5 in an office. So I said thank you very much for the offer, but I am actually quitting and leaving Quebec, and I'm going to Australia. So I applied for a visa beginning of December, I think. I got my visa approved, and like 2 weeks after I was flying to Australia. Very last minute decision, but I thought about Australia a bit before, but not that much, and yeah, I just did it.
Yeah. But what it was that ultimately made you choose was the screensaver.
Yeah, I think when I decided that I wanted to go to Australia, I started checking a little bit, and I knew I didn't want to go to Melbourne because the weather was not good, and I wanted to go anywhere else. And then I ended up staying 8 months in Melbourne and really falling in love with it. And that's why I did my farms, and that's why I extended my years, because I love Melbourne too much. So I just learned Australia, no plan is gonna work ever. Everything I try to do changed, and every plan I'm making keeps rotating. So just go with the flow and don't make any plans is the best way to go.
Yeah. So what happened where you first arrived to Melbourne?
I arrived in Sydney, and I had traveled for a month before that. So I went to Europe for 3 weeks with friends. They stayed in Europe to do working holiday visa. And I went on my own for the first time. So I had been traveling for 10 years every summer, but always with friends. And that time I was on my own for the first time in London, flew to Singapore, which I absolutely loved. Loved the hostel, loved the city. Didn't stay for 4 nights. And
What?
then we were just going out and then going up early, getting up early and going out. We slept 3-4 hours per night. And I met people that were so nice that we ended up being roommates in Melbourne months after. Um, but I love Singapore so much that when I arrived in Sydney, I really didn't like it. And I think I was jet lag, I was hangover, I was a bit not homesick, but I was like homesick of Singapore or of Europe. And I really didn't like Sydney. I stayed a week. I did couch surfing, so I slept on people's couch, which was really nice. And I met Aussies straight from the start, who gave me Tim Tams, brought me to rugby, and made me watch like reality shows and eat Vegemite. So it was full on experience. Um, but the hostel, I didn't like it at all, and I think I was just not ready for that kind of life. There were a lot of long terms. I didn't know that people lived in hostels sometimes, and it was rainy. And visually speaking, I've been 4 more times to Sydney. I don't like it. There's nothing to explain. It's just
Really?
yeah, I didn't find it attractive. I don't know, can't say this for city, but like I think I took 20 photos in a week, and arrived in Melbourne and I had 100 photos in 24 hours. And in Sydney, I felt like a bit like you described in Toronto. It was really business. People were always in a rush. People were not smiling that much. I don't know. It's hard to explain. It just didn't feel like I belonged there at all.
Mhm.
And it was just a start because the flight was cheap. And then I thought, oh, let's do a road trip. So I wrote on Couchsurfing because you can meet people also to do activities
Mhm.
that I wanted to go to Melbourne. So I found 3 other people. We rented a car together and we drove during 3 days to Melbourne. And I arrived there and I spent 24 hours. I did a pub crawl at night, a walking tour during the day, and then I decided I wanted to live here because the nightlife was good and people were so nice. I don't know. It might have been coincidence, but every time I go back to Melbourne and I lived there for 8 months, I generally think people are really more laid back, and they would smile, hold the door. People would tell random people in a train that their clothes look nice. There's live music everywhere in the streets, a tram, and then yeah, I decided I was gonna stay there even if it was Melbourne and bad weather in general. But it reminded me of Montreal. It's actually very similar. But yeah.
Just not quite as cold the winters.
No, it's not as cold, but it's still very hectic weather.
Yeah, I don't know how you have the energy to do all of this. Like just the Singapore 4 days no sleep and 24 hours just going doing all those things. You are crazy. I don't know where you find the energy. And
I love doing it.
now party 4 times a week, no?
Pretty much, yeah. But I'm dead in the morning, but I will sleep when I'm dead.
No, it's really funny that you say that about Sydney because I feel purely talking visually, I never lived in Sydney. I only stayed for a couple of weeks. Visually, I think Sydney is so much nicer than Melbourne. Like with the beaches, Sydney has amazing beaches, really, really beautiful beaches, and a lot of nice parks. I also lived in Melbourne. I arrived there, and then I was there for the first 4 months of the pandemic. I I guess that did kind of taint my view,
Of course, yeah.
because we were locked in, and in winter it was miserable weather. And I never had the chance to live in Sydney, so I think if I go back to Australia, maybe I would give it a go. But
To Sydney, yeah. And Melbourne is definitely so different. I lived 4 months the first time, 2018, and then the second time was at the same time than you, which I don't remember. I knew that, but I was there from February to June 2020, and obviously it's so different. I mean, no activities, no social life, like music, everything that makes Melbourne was not happening. And I think it's less impressive than Sydney, but once you discover it, every small neighborhood has its charm and its personality. I know it's the same also in Sydney, but for me, the beaches are fine in Sydney, but beaches are way better in Queensland or WA. And
yeah,
then the port is very, very pretty, the harbor. But I like in Melbourne the old building next to the new ones, and I feel like every time I walk, I want to take photos of everything I see, like different colors, different shape. Whereas Sydney was a bit more neutral. Um, similar, but it's very. I think you like one or the other. It's a classic.
Yeah. But I do also feel like I went back for another 3 weeks, 1 month, in 2022, and it there was this sense of comfort, going back there. I think you're right. Is definitely a case of culture. Like Sydney is Melbourne is a more cultural city. There's lots of things to do. But when all of that was shut down in the pandemic,
There's nothing.
doesn't have anything, especially with the weather, But then again, I don't like Brisbane. I don't know what you think of Brisbane.
I'm pretty neutral. I live in Gold Coast, which I definitely didn't like at all. The beaches were nice though. Like the beaches in Gold Coast are super pretty, but it rained almost the whole time I was there. But I didn't really like
But
the.
you live surfers, no?
Yeah, I live in Surfers Paradise. I know the South is a bit more appreciated usually, but it was just a big clap coming from early. I've been to Brisbane heaps of time. I never lived there, but I think if I'm to be in a city, I'd rather be next to the beach, and it felt a bit too calm for me, I think. But it is clean. It's pretty itself. I love skyscrapers, so I would rather live in Brisbane than Sydney, but rather live in Perth or Melbourne than Brisbane as well.
Yeah, for me, it was the beaches thing, that there's no beaches in this. Yeah, I think Gold Coast is nicer for that reason. But if you live outside of surfers, if you live in surfers, it's just, it's a bit, it's interesting.
Hard to define, yeah.
But yeah, so, and Perth, what do you think of Perth?
I love it. I really love it. I think it's a small Melbourne, pretty much. Apparently it's changing a lot recently, but it has hidden bars, rooftop movies. It's got a lot of parks and greenery, so that's good. Everywhere you go, there's a big park. It's very quiet though at night. It doesn't feel like a big city one bit. CBD is super tiny, but Melbourne CBD is tiny as well. But like things close very early. The Woolies will close at 5 p.m. on a weekend, which is crazy for me. And I still had Melbourne in mind the first time I went, but it's not the same at all. It's very relaxed, laid back. People are friendly. What I love of Melbourne, I found it there as well. Of people not in rush, but the FIFO culture, so the fly in, fly out, people going to mines makes it very different city, because there's never 2 million people. Because I don't know what's the percentage, but so many people work in mines that they're not physically in Perth. Almost everybody I've met there worked in mines, backpackers included. So it's very hard to, like, I think it takes the time to adapt. That 1 week is full of people and there's so many activities you can do, and the week after all your friends are working in a mine and then there's nobody around. And you feel it in the street. Like a Wednesday night at 9 p.m, there might be nobody in the street. You go to Melbourne 2 a.m. on a Monday, you're going to see people. And even in Early, where I am now, it's easier to go out every single day, even if it's 5,000 people, because it's touristic and a party town and a younger as well crowd. But Perth is just, it's super alive on the weekend, and then on the week it's very dead. So I haven't been there for long, maybe 3 months in total. Not even 3 months, but the beaches are incredible. I think it's the best mix if somebody wants a city and good weather and beaches as well. And it's still quite cultural, just on a like smaller level, but a lot of festivals, markets, movie theater, events and food. I think it's a really good city, but it's extremely far from everything. Very, like, you can't go to Melbourne on a weekend. You can take a week off, but I mean, it's so long together. It's like Canada. It's like crossing. It took me a flight, then a layover, then another flight to come here in Early. But so it makes it less accessible to people to come and visit, and it makes it hard to leave as well. So people just stay in WA for years.
Yeah, it's the most remote city in the world.
I know, 2,000 k from any other cities.
But don't you feel like that's going to be too quiet for you to really settle down?
I did think about it. That's why I didn't want to go at first. I traveled 2 years ago to West Coast, and I loved the landscape, but I said I'm never going to live there. It's too quiet. Not enough nightlife, blah, blah, blah. But in the end, Early has a good nightlife, but it's still a one-street town, and it gets very small, and there's not that much to do. So I think coming from there, it's way easier to appreciate Perth than if I'd gone from Melbourne to Perth, because then I would have lost so many activities. But coming from a small city where I don't have a movie theater, I don't have pretty much not much to do here. The social part is amazing, the sailing, but if it's raining, what can you do? Not much. But there are so many things that I had missed in the last years that I can actually do. I think it's a good compromise if I don't want to be in Melbourne. That's pretty much the next option.
Yeah. Where's the closest cinema to you? Is it Proserpine?
Yeah, and it's not even a cinema. Like, it's Bowen, the closest one. But they do show movies in Proserpine. But sometimes you can go with the bus, but the bus doesn't come back after because it's too late.
Really?
Yeah. I really like movies, so I have a membership in Perth, and it's easier, you know, you have everything walking distance as well, being CBD. Should give it a go when you come back.
Well, I visited Perth. I was there for 6 weeks. 2 of those weeks were in quarantine.
Yeah, ideal.
But I don't know. I think it was definitely about a headset thing. When I was there, I wasn't really of a good mind. And I just didn't, I did feel the remoteness there, you know, and I had one good friend, but yeah, it was just, and he was going back to Townsville as well. So, and then I was going back, like, I'd kind of made a plan to leave before, just as I'd arrived.
Yeah, so you're just in a visiting mode, not settling down and exploring everything.
Yeah, and that was a bit of a problem, maybe. I would love to do the West Coast. I think I've heard so many amazing things, but yeah, I don't even know when I'm gonna go back to Australia. I think I'm also interested by Darwin. I think living in Darwin would be an interesting experience.
Definitely, yeah. Love to try it as well.
But goodness knows. I think about New Zealand as well. I think I'll probably go to New Zealand before I go back to Australia.
Yeah, if you haven't been, if you like big landscapes, and New Zealand is incredibly pretty. It's a completely different lifestyle than Australia, though. Especially than Queensland. I traveled 3 months. I've never lived there, but I traveled 3 months.
3 months traveling around.
Yeah, 2 months after my first year here and 1 month before coming back. But we were camping. It's very, very pretty. It's definitely the prettiest country I've seen in the world.
Wow.
Like I had seen a bit of everything in different parts, but it's so condensed in the same country. Like the North Island reminds me of North Queensland, of Hawaii, and then the South Island is similar to the west side of Canada with the lakes and fjord and mountains. But to have all this together with volcanoes and deserts and like the amount of diversity you can get there, it's incredible.
There are deserts in New Zealand.
And the North Island, like sand dunes. It's not huge desert, but you can do sandboarding and on the north of the north. Yeah.
I had no idea.
People usually see the south only. I really prefer the north because it's tropical forest, sand dunes, volcanoes, sleeping one, and it's really more tropical. Gorgeous beaches, surf. Everybody just thinks of mountains and like Lord of the Rings stuff, but it's good, but it's completely different. In hostel, people would wake up early and eat like granola and healthy stuff, and then go hike a mountain, go to bed at 9. And I was just arriving from Queensland, where you do the complete opposite, like way, way more of a party vibe in general, or nightlife, or just in general in Australia. But there, people are too healthy. Like they're really into sports and activities and not much nightlife. So they're close from each other, but it's completely different.
Bloody Kiwis aren't into nightlife. I don't believe that for a second.
It's quite Queenstown. It's good.
Kiwis are crazy. They love a party.
Depends where. Like in Queenstown, it is definitely party town, but the rest of it, the life is more towards the outside and hiking and surfing and stuff like this.
Yeah.
But I'm not a local. I haven't lived there for long, but just the hostel experience was completely different.
So have you seen the majority of the country, would you say?
I think so. The North Island, I've seen a lot of it. The South, I've seen most of it. Not the North not the south, but I've seen to Milford Sound and then went around. But definitely the south. I've been to most places. The north
And
one, sorry.
and the North Island, they still have quite a cold winter, or it doesn't get so cold?
I was there in summer both times. I think winter is a bit. The north of the north is like early beach, so they get like 20 during the day, 15, 20, and then it gets colder at 9.
No way. I had thought the whole of New Zealand gets not not anything like a Canadian winter, but I thought that they have like the whole of New Zealand has a winter.
More the South Island gets snow a lot, but the north one, my friend was living on the top of the top in north, and it was very similar to here, like not a proper winter. Still gets colder and windy, and it's crazy windy. And Wellington's the windiest capital of the world, so it is cold, and it got a lot of rain, but not that much snow. And the north of the North Island is really more of a tropical climate, so it doesn't get that cold.
Yeah, good to know. Yeah, hopefully. Well, I don't know when, but I'll make my video at some point.
Yes, you tell me. I'll tell you.
And you've also, was this your first time? No, this wasn't your first time in Southeast Asia this year.
Well, except from Singapore, which a lot of people say it's not generally a good representation of Asia. So that's the only place I had been. And then Thailand was my first time in Southeast Asia.
And what did you think?
Loved it to pieces so much. I loved it way more than I expected to like it, actually. I just went because I went with my 2 best friends from home, and I don't remember how we picked it, actually, but it was a good in-between to meet there. And we had all been to Europe before and to South America, and one of my friends had been to Asia, but not Thailand. And I don't know, we just ended up going to Thailand, and I had no expectation. I just wanted to spend time with them. And it turned out that it's one of the countries that I like the most of all of my travels for various reasons. But I think that so many things are good. The food is good, the temperature, it's hot and humid, which I like. So for other people, it makes it very hard, but it's exactly what I was looking for. And the snorkeling is incredible. The north is very different from the south, so it feels like you're traveling in 2 different countries, even if it's the same countries. One more forest and like mountains and more culture temples, and the south is very similar to Australian islands here, the snorkeling and more party mode. Have you been? I don't remember.
Nope, never to Thailand, only to Indonesia and Malaysia.
Okay.
So another pending.
Another one. We'll finish this and have so many things on our list.
Yeah, no, I know. But it's really hard choosing the places to visit. Like I really feel like I want to visit Central America and go back down to South America. But then, I also have the ideas about India and Nepal and Southeast Asia, going to Thailand and the Philippines.
There's so many places. I don't know for you, but I always want to go back to the places I love, but I also want to discover other places. So it's super hard to know which one will make us happier.
Yeah, and especially when you go to other corners of the world and you're so far away from those places that you love. And you've been to Japan, no?
Only 30 hours, really fast on the layover. So I just visited Tokyo super fast and lost so much time in transport that I didn't see much.
Yeah. And where in the world where's the place that's really calling your attention next?
I've always wanted to go, well, always, not when I was 6 years old, but for a long time wanted to go to Middle East and Maghreb. And it's not in Middle East, but I went to Istanbul this year, and just the more different in culture, like the obvious different with the mosques and the singing, and the visually it's very different. I absolutely loved it. I like warm countries in general, so I think maybe I'm more attracted as well towards a lot of places, but I want to see places that are completely different from what I'm used to, which was nice in Thailand, because you feel like you're somewhere else, different language and food and a lifestyle. Whereas if you travel in a lot of countries in Europe, it stays a bit similar. And South America, I've done it, so every country is different, of course. But I really like to be somewhere I don't know anything about, and I have to try to learn how everything works. So I think for that, it's big generalization, but I've always wanted to go to Jordan and Oman and definitely visit more of Turkey because I've only seen Istanbul. But yeah, I think next place would be more of Turkey.
Yeah. Istanbul is a place that I've wanted to visit as well, and I think it's another very old part of the world. Lots of culture.
It's got so much history that we don't have in Quebec or in Australia, so it's very impressive when you get there and you realize how much history there's between, like, in that city that's been there for so long, and the whole world has been turning. So yeah.
And another country that I think you'd really like, which is just like that, is Bosnia.
Okay. Why for? What for?
Sarajevo, I visited like 2 years ago. I knew nothing about Bosnia before I went, and when I went to Sarajevo and learning about all the history, that was where Franz Ferdinand got shot.
Yeah,
and everyone started like seeing that with my own eyes, just the explosion of the world, kind of, and so much history and culture, different cultures meeting. Like Sarajevo is another melting pot of lots of cultures and religions, and it's really really nice, really cool. So
I will also add that to my long list now.
So I think we'll come to the end now. Before I ask you my 3 questions, do you have any questions for me?
I don't think so, no. Just when are you coming to visit me? That's the only thing.
Well, we'll see. Maybe next year, maybe the year after. We'll see.
Okay.
Okay. So the question from the last guest is, what would you do to give your family a better life? And is this something that you are working on?
It's a hard one to reply because I feel like they already really love their life and they're comfortable in it. I like to think that their life would be even better and mine would be better if we were closer, because we really get along and like we speak and everything. But I think our relationship is good enough that we could be happy seeing each other every week, or living in the same neighborhood. So if I could fly them here and they would stay with me or wherever I'll end up, I think I would do this. But for now, I think they've made their happiness. They're really good at doing what they like and creating a world that makes them happy. So I think I can go back and see them as much as I can. But they're very, I don't know how to explain it, but they're very good at being happy. My whole family, like, they don't take anything for granted. They're very grateful of everything. And my grandmother is deceased now, but she used to say at the end of every day she would create a flower bouquet of happiness. So every, like a mental one, every small things that made her smile during the day, she would thank. She was a Christian, she would thank God for it. But in general, she would just say thanks to everything and be so grateful about life. And I feel like my whole family is like this, very positive. And if they want something to happen, they will make things, like they will take the ways that it's necessary to make it happen. So I think they don't need me too much.
Yeah, and I think it's very evident that that's rubbed off on you.
Yeah,
you're a happy and joyful person, and you're always a pleasure to be around. You always bring a very nice, warm energy. So,
thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. So, what question would you like to ask the next guest?
Tough one. I haven't been able to think while talking, while speaking. I would say maybe if you could do your dream job wherever you want it. Let's say you have all the money in the world, you win at Lotto, whatever. What would you do? Because just to explain it a bit more, I think like a lot of people, they would win and say, "Oh, I don't want to work. I'm just gonna sit down." Yeah. What would you do if you had all the money? And I think some other people would just, build casinos and do a lot of things. So if you could do anything you wanted and money was not an issue, what would be your dream project? What would be your first thing you would do?
Okay, very nice. And finally, a message in your language that you would like to share.
Message. Je vais dire en accent québécois. Je vais dire bonjour à tout le monde. Merci d'avoir écouté. J'espère que c'était pas trop ennuyant, que j'ai dit des informations intéressantes. J'espère que vous allez tous visiter le Québec parce qu'on est un peuple qui aime beaucoup faire découvrir notre culture. Et je vous dis coucou de l'Australie. Merci.
Understood. Plus ou moins.
Excusez-moi.
Can you translate to everyone and what that message means and what it means to you?
Yes, I just said thank you to everyone. I hope you enjoyed it and it wasn't too boring that I said interesting things. And I hope everybody will come to visit Quebec because I think we like to share our culture and we really like the world to know what Quebec is like, and we like to meet other people and also come to visit Australia because it's different, but it's also amazing and way warmer.
Yeah, that's where you are. You're probably
Yes.
not going to be in Quebec when they come.
In summer, come and visit Quebec, but yeah, enjoy the culture while I'm here.
And do you think you'll go back next year? Is that your plan?
I will try, yes, in July. I don't know where I'll be next month, so I'm not sure of anything for now.
Yeah, no, for sure.
We'll see.
Well, thank you so much for your time today. It was lovely, a lovely conversation, a lovely chance to catch up.
It was.
And really appreciate hearing about your experiences and your thoughts and opinions. And yeah.
Thanks to you. It was really interesting.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. Have a great weekend. This was Backpacks and Stories episode 2.